Hello everyone, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. Welcome to From the South. Only 5 days until critical elections in Venezuela, voters have been able to familiarize with the system. A proposal by the FARC rebels to create special peace territories has been denied by the government. And Germany has plans to engage in foreign military operations for the first time since World War II. Hello again, good evening. To begin, Venezuelans continue to prepare for this Sunday's parliamentary elections. Now, the country's president and the president of the United Socialist Party, Nicolás Maduro, accompanied the campaign closing of the Great Patriotic Poll Alliance in the state of Portuguesa, where voters will elect 6 National Assembly members. During the event, Maduro highlighted the achievements accomplished in the region by former President Hugo Chávez.
On August 14, 2004, Portuguese was the first voting state for Chávez nationwide. We have never lost here against the Squani. We got 19 out of 19 and on December 6 we got 20 out of 20.
De 19-19 y el 6 de diciembre de 2020.
And the Minister of Defense, Vladimir Padrino, has said that the opposition's calls asking the army to respect the Constitution were not necessary, since they are very aware of their duty.
The
main task of a Bolivarian armed force is for the people of Venezuela to be able to go out with confidence, freely, happily to cast their votes on Sunday, December 6th.
And Venezuelan authorities said they have arrested 3 suspects of being involved in the murder of opposition candidate Luis Manuel Diaz, although their identities were not reported. According to police officials, Diaz held ties with construction union mafias in Guárico, the state of Guárico, and was also a member of a criminal gang known as Los Plateados, which specializes in extortion, assassinations, and kidnappings. Total transparency is the aim of Venezuela's Electoral Council. Over the last months, people have been encouraged to take part in voting simulations to familiarize themselves with the system ahead of parliamentary elections set for Sunday. With more now, here's Isabel Fimbo.
The electoral process in Venezuela begins with voters searching for their identification numbers to find the table where they have to vote. A thumbprint activates the system and proves that the voter hasn't voted before. All the parties appear on the screens in big clear boxes. People can also search by candidate's name and their face will appear. Once you've pressed on the candidate you want, a message appears asking if you're sure. And when you are, you simply press vote. The machine then prints out a paper proving you voted, which you then pop in the box. Finally, after signing, you dip a finger in indelible ink so that people know you've voted. Venezuela's electoral body is confident that fraud is almost impossible. Tania D'Amelio, director of the National Electoral Council, says that the system ensures that.
In Venezuela, one vote is guaranteed. Then, of course, the facility that we have, that is our automated system. On top of that, on that day, all Venezuelans audit our vote. How do we audit our vote? A proof of vote comes out where you can identify with certainty if you voted. It's vital for the result of the election for voters to have complete trust in the voting system.
There is no possibility of fraud. It is impossible that there is fraud in our electoral system. It's good, perfect, very good. I believe it is the best that there is now.
The Venezuelan electoral system is designed to be impregnable. Fully automated and auditable, its streets ahead of many of the most developed countries. And on Sunday, under the gaze of observers from different parties and nations, it will be put to the test.
Now, the Venezuelan people have given their stamp of approval to the system. Yet the Venezuelan opposition have said they won't recognise the result of the election. Isabel Fimbo, Telesur, Caracas.
The government of Colombia has rejected the FARC's proposals to create special peace territories, arguing that the country will not be divided. Now the guerrilla group asked the government to make certain security guarantees, including the demilitarization of certain guerrilla zones following the signing of a final peace deal. Now they also requested that the government guarantee the FARC and its members be recognized as a political organization. The Colombian government and FARC recently agreed to change the format of negotiations during the final leg of peace talks in an effort to speed up negotiations and reach an agreement for the official deadline of March 23, 2016.
The FARC must be absolutely clear that the process we're moving forward on is not to include counterclaims or the redefining of the mission or the budget, the size of the armed forces, nor how their organization functions. As a team, we will not do it, and the instructions we received from the president have been clear and precise. Therefore, the extensive and daily reports from the last few days, full of issues and proposals related to the armed forces and national police of Colombia, simply reflect aspirations of the FARC that have no future.
Security is a problem that has more to do with the police rather than military forces, so we consider the function of policing in the territories can be carried out in many ways without necessarily resulting in the continued presence of the armed forces, which we believe should take place after the closing of the agreement in order to other functions are performed, such as defense of our territory and our sovereignty.
In Argentina now, the president-elect Mauricio Macri announced that several former executives from top global companies will be part of his future cabinet. Now, this has already triggered reactions by social movements which do not agree with the pro-business orientation of the future government officials. Reporting now from Buenos Aires, here's our correspondent Laureano Ponce.
After several days of negotiating with his political allies, Argentina's president-elect, businessman Mauricio Macri, has managed to give shape to his future cabinet. Former executives from top companies like General Motors, banks JP Morgan and HSBC, and oil giant Shell, among others, have been confirmed in key positions in the executive branch.
It's clear that this new cabinet is quite different from the previous ones in the last 10 to 15 years. There evidently is a bigger presence of private sector representatives. Many of them come from multinational corporations rather than from political activism.
This relationship between the future government and the corporate sector raises the question about the influence that such economic powers could have in upcoming political decisions. However, factors like the lack of majority in Congress and the support of the ruling Front for Victory still finds make it seem difficult for Macri to push hardcore neoliberal reforms such as privatizations in his first years in office.
There seems to be no consensus for neoliberal policies, at least in almost half of the population, which voted for Daniel Sisoli, and in the other 52% that voted for Macri, I don't know how many people are aware of the effects neoliberal policies could have, so I would be pretty careful.
The strong corporate profile of the new cabinet has already set off alarms in social movements and workers' unions, who have said they will not accept to lose the achievements made under the Kirchner's governments.
What they are trying to do is to gain back the only piece they lost in the power game, which is to have an economic minister who can be handled by remote control by the economic corporations.
It's not casual that they started talking about the agreement with the Pacific Alliance, about a free trade agreement with the European Union. It's an attempt to, once again, to align Latin America with the interests of the U.S.
The last time private sector executives were appointed as government officials in Argentina was in the neoliberal 1990s. Despite trying to appear as state-of-the-art politics, Macri's corporate cabinet seems to remind some of Argentina's hardest times. Laureano Ponce, Telesur, Buenos Aires.
Without coming to an agreement on the revision of current migration policies, the second biannual meeting between Cuba and the U.S. has ended in the context of the normalization of relations. Bianca Perez now reports from Washington.
Through a press release, the Cuban embassy in the United States declared that the U.S. delegation does not have intentions to change the migration policies currently in place for Cuban citizens, alluding to the wet foot, dry foot policy. Experts coincide that this law greatly affects the citizens of the island.
Wet foot, dry foot, same thing. That was established in another era. It's not rational now. It's causing a large humanitarian problem for Cubans who are doing nothing more than trying to find a better life, a better economic situation for themselves and their families.
These conversations took place during the second biannual meeting between the two delegations, which did not have media access. The U.S., on their part, showed concern because of the thousands of Cubans currently attempting to access the United States through Central America.
I think, in some ways it could mean that things will move faster. It also could slow things down. It could create sort of larger concrete problems that have to be dealt with before we can deal with some of the bigger problems later.
Though there still remain many differences that have to be worked out between the two nations, citizens continue to hope for a fast normalization of relations that will allow them to reap the benefits of this change.
The past is really the past, and going forward, I think both parties have a lot that they can learn from each other and can benefit each other a lot going forward. So I think there really isn't much to be served by things staying the way they are, and I think the future could be bright if we open up the borders to everything.
The Cuban delegation extended an invite to continue these conversations in Havana during the first half of 2016. Bianca Perez, Telesur, Washington, D.C.
We go to the Mexican state of Guerrero now, where gunmen stormed Sunday's Gay Queen Festival and killed 3 people near the popular tourist city of Acapulco. 5 others were wounded there. Over 1,200 homicides have been committed in Mexico in the last 19 years. The parents of 5 black young men who were shot dead by Brazilian police in Rio de Janeiro have decried racism as well as police conspiracy to cover up the crime. Now, for relatives and other residents from the Costa Barros neighborhood, the attack was the latest blow in what they see as an undeclared war against poor, mostly black people living in favelas. At least 50 shots hit the car where the youth were traveling, leaving it riddled with bullet holes. 4 members of the police have been arrested. They are also accused of planting a pistol at the crime scene to back their claim of having come under fire, a version swiftly shown to be false after preliminary examinations of the car.
They just saw 5 black men in the car and killed them. Because if they had been 5 white men, their mothers would be sitting here smiling instead of crying. But they were black, from the favelas. That is why our sons were killed, you see, because they lived in Costa Barros.
Moving to Peru now, where public hospitals are at a critical state, but the government is not attending to the needs of patients there. Our correspondent now in Lima reports.
Danitza is 3 years old and she needs an operation. Her father has been trying to get her help at Hipólito Unanue Hospital, but has been unable because all operations have been cancelled due to the lack of anesthesiologists.
On the right side of her vaginal area, she has a hernia, and my daughter, being so small, complains about it every day. She has more pain daily, and that's why I have come almost every day, or at least every other day for the last 3 months to the hospital, and nothing. There is no date to move forward with.
The situation at the hospital, which is supposed to serve 2 million people, reflects the current state of public health services in the country, where there is great lack of resources. Some employees have not been paid for months, and the government is making further budget cuts for 2016. Many doctors believe it is all an attempt to privatize the system.
That is no solution. That would be a solution for those who want to take advantage of the situation and become wealthy. But what the state has to guarantee is health. Health is a right. It's not an economic good. It's a right, and under the Constitution, it is declared as such.
Estimates indicate that with next year's budget cuts, the public health system will have to stop hiring close to 10,000 employees, such as medics, nurses, and laboratory technicians, adding up to the burden of the already collapsing hospitals and preventing new patients from even registering for new services. Rael Mora, Telesur, Peru.
An illegal gold mine used by criminal gangs and illegal miners has been blown up in Panama's dense jungle. 4 Colombians have been arrested. Now, the mine was located in Rio Caña Blanca in Darien province, and according to authorities, it was used by criminal gangs passing through the jungle region that borders Colombia. Authorities dynamited the site and burnt mining equipment being used. And after the break, one country has approved to engage in military operations abroad, something not that common for that particular country. We'll have more information. There's your hint when we come back.
Discover Latin America and the world in our programs. Telesur Reports, The Real USA, the stories behind the tweets. Ataman, Lives, Know Your Body, Open Files. Exposing the conflicts that affect our people. Compelling personal stories and the most controversial events. See it all on telesurtv.net in English. Telesur. Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Day by day, they're in the street with one mission: change the world through their actions. This is a different type of program, a conversation. The perspective you won't find in traditional media can be found on The Laura Flanders Show. Watch it on telesurtv.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there.
We need to understand the world we live in. We require news with critical points of view, thorough analysis, and social commitment. This information is vital to think, to understand, and to change. The world demands a new perspective. telesurtv.net/English. Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Germany has announced that it will join the French campaign against Daesh in Syria. The government has agreed to send 6 Tornado reconnaissance jets, refueling aircraft, frigates to protect a French aircraft carrier, and up to 1,200 military personnel to the region for a year. However, they said they will conduct airstrikes. The decision is very significant since the country has avoiding foreign military entanglement and voter misgivings about getting involved in the conflict in the Middle East after World War II. And in Paris now, 7 men suspected to have been part of a jihadist smuggling network from France to Syria in 2013 have faced their first day of trial. Now, it is the first trial involving suspected Daesh militants since the deadly attacks in France's capital back on November 13th. One of the defendants, Salim bin Halem, a 35-year-old French citizen considered one of the leading figures of Islamic Daesh recruitment and believed to be involved in the same smuggling network as the other suspects, is not attending the trial. An international arrest warrant for bin Halem was issued on May 9th, 2014, but he still remains at large. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization has changed foreign ministers meeting in an attempt to ease tensions between Russia and Turkey following the downing of a Russian jet. With more now, we go to our correspondent, Hazem Abdullah.
In the aftermath of Turkey's downing of a Russian Su-24 fighter jet, the Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, announced that a NATO foreign ministers meeting would be held to discuss ways to reduce the risk of an escalation in tension with Russia. He added that NATO will continue to support Turkey in securing its air defense, saying Turkey is an important ally and this work isn't related to Russian plane crash last week.
NATO and the United States are behind Turkey. They're trying to increase the duration of the crisis and are investing even more on this war to achieve their policy interests in the region. So far, they've refused to cooperate in the coordinated offensive launched by Russia and Syria.
The Russian Defense Ministry announced that for the first time, the Russian jet in Syria departed from the airbase in Hmeimim for combat assaults with air-to-air short and medium-range missiles. These missiles were deployed to provide security to the aircraft of the Russian aerospace forces.
Military operations against terrorism are in accordance with national plans and a high coordination between all military units, so we can say that progress recently made is thanks to this effort.
At the same time, military sources confirmed that the Syrian army, supported by the Russian jets, continued advancing in the northeast countryside of Latakia and seized control of several villages and towns in the areas bordering Turkey. Hazim Abdullah, Dirisu, Syria.
A new report was released on the cause of that Air Asia passenger jet to plunge into the sea, killing all 162 people on board late last year. Now, according to investigators, problems related to a faulty rudder system, the response from the pilot and crew were among a string of factors that contributed to the crash. There was no indication that stormy weather played a role in the accident. Now, the report also said that the airline's maintenance system was, quote, not optimal, but added that the airline had since carried out a number of measures to ensure safety. South African athlete Oscar Pistorius could still face jail if the Supreme Court of Appeal decides so this Thursday. Now, the Paralympic gold medalist was released on parole in October after serving a fifth of his 5-year prison term for the culpable homicide of his girlfriend, Reva Steenkamp, who he killed by firing 4 shots through a locked toilet door on Valentine's Day 2013. Now, prosecutors said that he should be convicted of murder and sent back to jail because he knew the person behind the door could be killed when he fired. A murder conviction would result in a minimum sentence of 15 years in prison. And a look at sports now, where Chinese investors bought a 13% stake in Manchester City's parent company, City Football Group, for $400 million. Now, the deal is part of the CFG strategy of expanding into Chinese football, and it reflects the Chinese president Xi Jinping's aim to turn his country into a football powerhouse. Now, the deal, which includes CFG at around $3 billion, is still subject to regulatory approval. That's what we're covering this evening here from Caracas. Plenty more on all of those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. Check us out on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great evening.